Hey folks, Lyarri here. Today we're reacting to Illusions of Time by Vsauce. This video was recommended in the comments. I wanted to react to more Vsauce. Seems good. Let's go.
Hey, Vsauce, Michael here.
Hey.
When something becomes part of the past, can it ever truly be experienced again? Obviously, my beard will grow back, but it won't be the same beard and it won't be on the same person. It will be on a slightly older, different Michael. But of course, the bearded Michael of the past isn't completely
I didn't fix the audio
gone.
levels.
No, he still exists in our minds as a memory and in the form of records of the past, like images and video.
Good. Sorry, last audio edit.
Hi, I'm the slightly older, different Michael you heard about. I am 130 days older than that guy. Wow, 130 days. You know, it really doesn't seem like it was that long ago. Just as an optical illusion is a distortion of our sense of sight, a temporal illusion is a distortion of our sense of time. Some seem small, like how a minute spent waiting in line can seem to take forever, but an entire day with friends can just fly by. Some seem deeper, like the uncanny feeling we get from recordings that make people from long ago seem more real than usual, or the strange way time seems to sneak by. For example, the songs I liked as a kid, Wannabe, Mbop, Semi-Charmed Life, are as old to kids born today as the literal oldies were when I was born. How can that be true? Am I really that
crazy.
old now? I mean, I shouldn't be surprised. I know how time works, but yet I don't.
I feel like this is something when I was a kid where I was like, oh, I was never going to be one of those adults who's like, oh, wow, that thing 20 years ago feels so old now. But like now that I'm older, like I get it. It's just like a human thing that I think a lot of people do. It's really cool.
Far from being just mistakes, these illusions are the edges of another dimension of space-time. Not one given to us by physics, not one given at all, but one made by our minds. Let's begin with the different ways there are to feel time. Actually sitting down and consciously tuning into the passage of time as it happens is called feeling time prospectively. You can't do that to time that's already happened, except you can. If I were to ask you, without looking, to guess how long you have been watching this video, you'd probably be able to come up with a guess you were reasonably confident in.
Only means
you arrived at that guess by feeling time retrospectively, by measuring it as it appears in your memory. Now, with that in mind, we are ready to approach our first illusion, the holiday paradox. A 4-hour delay at the airport before your holiday can feel unbearably long while it's happening. But once you arrive, an exciting day at your destination can seem to fly by. Those feelings are all prospective timing. A week later, retrospectively, the delay often feels like a blip in your mind, and the day of sightseeing feels like a much longer, bigger part of your life. These are the long-short and short-long patterns of felt time. Which one you feel depends on whether what you are doing is empty or full. An empty activity is monotonous, unstimulating, unimportant to you, whereas a full activity is packed with sensations, novelty, significance, context change, and challenge.
Seeing this put into words is so cool. I never really thought about it like that, but it is true. Like I remember, like definitely in the moment. I think I've even said this to people before. Like in the moment, things felt like really long and whatever, but now like the thing that felt, yeah, I know. Like, sorry, basically repeating the video, but I can look back on the trips I've had and relate to that for sure.
Now, I experienced this during my 3 days in isolation. While I was there, time dragged very, very slowly.
A fear I have right now is that it's just Friday. And that there's still a lot of time left.
But now, years later, it's hard to believe that I spent 3 full days in that room? Jeez, seems like something I barely did.
Yeah.
Well,
it must like all blend in, right? It's like you're just in one room.
It's believed that prospective time feels fast when an activity is full because you're not busy thinking about time. If you're not attending to it, you're busy with something else, well, you won't notice how much time has passed. But to understand retrospective illusions, let's ask a different question. Does time speed up as we get older? Many of you may feel the same way. Looking back, my childhood feels like it lasted so long.
Yeah.
But my 20s went by faster, and my 30s are going by even faster than that. A popular explanation is the proportion theory. It suggests that time seems to speed up as we age because each new unit of time that we live is smaller relative to all the time that came before.
I heard of this.
The year you lived as a 9-year-old was 10% of your entire existence up to that point. But when you're 30, another year is just 3%.
He looks so different. Oh my god, I can't believe like that grew up into that. It's so crazy, isn't it? Oh my god.
More life. Studies have
I think he
found
looks good
little
in both
evidence that
pictures.
weeks, months, or even years are retrospectively remembered as passing faster by those who are older. But decades? Yes. And while it's true that the older we get, the faster we tend to think the last 10 years went by, that only appears to be the case until about the age of 50. After that, the speed of decades appears to plateau. A leading explanation is that how long a duration feels depends on how many things in it can be recalled.
I remember like my grandparents saying stuff like this as they got older or something, you know? Like I feel like people can observe this.
In my normal life, lots of different things happen every 3 days. But during the 3 days I was in isolation, so little happened that I have few distinct memories from it.
Yeah.
My mind sees that emptiness and perceives that it was brief.
Yeah, that 5 hours where I was sitting on the bed. I was just sitting on the bed the whole time. Kind of feels a lot shorter now.
So, perhaps a decline in new experiences and rapid novelty as we age means fewer events our brains decide to commit to memory. So then, looking back, because there are fewer distinct memories from more recent decades, we assume they were shorter. You know, reflecting on all of this, it's striking just how many moments are forgettable. John Koenig, the author of the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows,
This was always, very quickly, this was always something huge to me when I was growing up. Like, I always felt so bad if I would, like, forget memories, especially as I played a lot of video games growing up, and I always felt like maybe those memories wouldn't stay as strongly. And I definitely feel like there were times in my life where, like, those memories faded away, and there are memories I forget or, like, will remember later, and some memories I'm sure I'll never remember. But I feel like right now, like, I can remember, like, a lot of my moments gaming as a kid, which wasn't everything I did, but it was a lot. So like remembering like all those old games and stuff, and like what I realized is like if I could find the old game I played and like see what it was, then it would trigger a lot of related memories. And that was really fun, like going on like that nostalgic hunt. It's really neat.
calls the awareness of how few days are memorable Olika. Over time, our specific daily perceptions of what happened conglomerate into generalized ideas about how things were. Themes, moods, the big picture. What was perceptual becomes conceptual. And concepts are good. They lower cognitive load by wringing out details, leaving us with the broader, lighter gist. But they can also obscure reality, which brings us to our second distortion, chronological illusions.
Oh, yeah.
The world of our experience is not made of distinct entities. It's a continuity of fuzzy, overlapping blobs, and we impose concepts on it. For example, is a hot dog a sandwich? Is cereal soup? How many holes does a straw have? Those aren't questions about reality.
Wait, doesn't a straw only have 2 holes? I need to watch that video.
Questions about words we made up. Periodization is the chopping up of time into contrived pieces like the Stone Age, the Renaissance, the 80s, the 90s. But here's the thing. When did the 80s or 90s really happen? I mean, mathematically, they refer to years that have 8s or 9s in the tens place. But conceptually? Well, it's not like on January 1st, 1980, people woke up and were like, whoa, 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 guys, it's the 80s, quick, everyone, change your clothes. Concepts say too much and too little.
Oh, sorry, this is very random, but like that '70s show, right? And part of this you can point to like production, right? Like just making a show set in the '70s. It's set in the later, I think 1975 is when it starts, or 1976. And I know the new show is set like a whole year or two later. The 80, is it '80s or '90s? I think it's not, I don't remember. But the one where they have like the same cast for Netflix, I think, that's set like later in the decade too, even. And I think like obviously there's a variety of reasons for that, like encapsulating the turn of the decade is like a lot more interesting conceptually, I guess. But I do think like it also points to the fact that our preconceived notions of the decade is exactly like he says, pointed towards like the later half.
Facts that expose their imperfections are perennial favorites on social media. I made an entire video about them, in fact. But what hasn't been discussed yet is the mechanisms by which we allow them to do their dirty work. Let's dig in and see what we can find.
Like sorry, one of the things that I read recently, like Seinfeld was released like 3 months before the Berlin Wall fell or something, maybe 4 months or whatever, and The Simpsons was a few months after. Like that's so interesting. I watched both of those shows like 2 years ago for the first time, and like it was, I didn't realize that, like the date significance. It was neat.
If I asked you to lay down on the floor of a windowless, clockless room and get up after you thought a minute had passed, you'd probably do a pretty good job. But if I asked you to get up after you thought 10 years had passed, that'd be hard. We lack an ability to sense and grasp long periods of time. Also, we can't remember everything that happens. So instead of comprehending history's correct scale and structure, I believe that our minds often just use how we think about past events to place them relative to each other in time. One way we do this is through what I call the conceptual comparison heuristic, a technique whereby we use the similarity of elements in our conception
I laugh because heuristic is a funny word to me. I don't know why.
of things to judge their temporal distance. If our concepts of two things suggest wildly different times, it's natural to assume that a lot of things happened between them. And if a lot happened, the duration separating them must be large. Alternatively, if our concepts aren't too different, the time between them must be bare of events, and so it feels brief. It's not a bad strategy, but tyrannosaurs died out 66 million years ago, and when T-Rexes began roaming the Earth, stegosaurs had already been extinct for more than 80 million years. To a T-Rex, the Stegosaurus was even more ancient than we think T-Rexes are. Here's another example. When we think of Marilyn Monroe, we think of a young woman, old Hollywood, mid-century glamour, Americana, black and white.
I love her.
When we think of the Queen of England, we think of an old woman in color in England and news headlines. Because those conceptions are quite different, we mentally place each woman in a different time. So it can come as a surprise to learn that they were both born in the same year. Similarly, it can be surprising to learn that Anne Frank and Martin Luther King Jr. were also born in the same year.
Right?
And
Isn't
if
that
they were alive
crazy?
today, they would both be younger than the Queen of England. When Harriet Tubman
The Boondocks is the reason I knew the age of Martin Luther King. Wait, is it? Wait, I forget they age him up in that. I'm pretty sure they do, right? Because it's like, oh, what if MLK was still alive? I haven't watched the Boondocks in like 2 years. I don't remember the specifics of the plots. I'm sorry. So good though. It was very fun.
was born, Thomas Jefferson was alive. And when she died, Ronald Reagan was alive. This is surprising to many of us because our concepts of these people are anchored to them as adults. But Harriet Tubman was a 4-year-old when Thomas Jefferson died, and when she died, Ronald Reagan was a 2-year-old. Far from just being amusing, chronological illusions can often have teeth. America can feel like an idea fixed long before any of us by the overwhelming bulk of events that came before. But Barbara Walters has been alive for more than a third of America's entire history. And if you were 25, you have already lived through and been a part of more than 10% of America's history. Chronological illusions
I'm a
may
little
also
under
be
10%. Yeah.
caused by what I
Sorry.
call the construal level heuristic, a technique whereby we place things in time based on whether we construe them concretely or abstractly. In social psychology, construal level theory describes how abstract and concrete thinking relate to psychological distance. That is, how distant something seems as opposed to how distant it actually is. Now, unsurprisingly, it's been found that people tend to think about things that are psychologically distant more abstractly. But studies have
Yeah.
also found that if people are asked to think about an event abstractly, they'll consider it more distant than if asked to construe it concretely. This may explain why things can turn out to be longer ago or more recent than we thought. If an event recedes especially quickly from relevance or is suddenly replaced in our daily thoughts by other more urgent events unconnected to it, our minds may shift its construal to a higher level, making it feel further back in time than it really is. Conversely, if attending to the low-level details of an event continues to be important, our construal level heuristic will make it feel closer in time than it really is. Our third illusion of time comes from the fact that time is always moving forward. Because of that, the psychological distances we feel towards things should also always be changing. But not all of them do. The belief that your place in time is stable is what I call the chronostatic illusion. Tim Urban pointed out that it is now the case that Jurassic Park
I used to read this blog in like 2016. I remember. Then he had like this Elon Musk arc, and I kind of stopped reading it. I never got back into it.
Forrest Gump, The Lion King were all released closer to the moon landing than today. As a person who remembers The Lion King being brand new and remembers feeling at that time that the moon landing was old, this is all very weird.
I mean, I don't remember that,
seems
but
so much more recent than the moon landing ever did to me. The conceptual comparison heuristic places them far apart. My concept of the 90s will probably always stray from my concept of the present a little less than it should, because the 90s and now have something in common that the 90s and the 60s never did or will: me. Also, my construal level of The Lion King may resist becoming abstract because The Lion King continues to evolve and happen. The mechanisms I use to place things in time have sunk hooks into The Lion King, creating a sort of chronostatic cling that fools me into believing it's more near. The music that was new when I was young has also been tethered in my mind to the idea of new stuff only us kids get.
Sorry. I feel like this is maybe the best time to pause for the foreseeable future. I always felt like, for me, I was born basically in the cutoff between Gen Z and millennials. Depending on like your generational definition, like I know the current Pew definitions, I'm considered Gen Z. Um, and it's super interesting to me to like, because generations, right? There's like broad things you can point to for different generations and over the overarching decades that they are construed within. But there's also differences between if you're like in early in the generation, middle, or late. And as like someone who's arguably early one generation, very early one generation, or very late another, I feel like it's just like an interesting dynamic sometimes, because I feel like when I talk to millennials versus when I talk to Gen Z, and obviously there's people who when I talk to them and they're older than me, they feel more young than me, but there's young people I talk to who feel older than me too, and obviously like I feel like there's always something you can observe, but sometimes it feels like for example, the younger people than me usually have like older brothers and sisters than me. Um and like I was raised on the internet, so in a lot of ways. So it's just you I don't know, it's really fun to think about. To me, I like thinking about like, oh, why are people the way they are in different ways, and like I feel like generations and explaining it through that perspective and that lens is one of the more like fun ways to do it.
Even as it has actually been drifting away, as far away as the stuff I used to think was far. A chronostatic illusion is spectacularly broken when you realize that you have become as old as your parents were when you were born. It doesn't always seem quite right. They came
Please
first,
God,
and
wait,
as
wait,
such,
sorry, I need to
should
figure this
always
out.
be older. But suddenly, you're aware of a way in which they aren't. Your age gap with people in the past is not
I'm still
static.
not as old.
Your
Oh
parents
God.
keep getting older right along with you, but the people they were
I'm literally I'm tearing up.
don't. This can lead to empathetic realizations. They weren't any wiser or more folded into the world then than you are now. Considering the temporal
That's
perspectives
very
of other
true.
people leads us to a fourth distortion, the chronocentric illusion. The belief that our own relationship to time is the best or only frame of reference, or that it's more important and more real than any other. My grandparents used to tell me about how when they were kids, they didn't have television. And I always thought that sounded so weird. I mean, obviously, I knew it was true, but like, what the heck did they do with their free time?
My parents remember when they got television, if I remember correctly. And that's pretty neat. I feel like having that like in like I because I grew up and I think there was a home computer in my house by the time I was like 4 or 5. My mom did like stuff that was like not tech stuff, but like required a computer earlier on than other like industries necessarily would, and especially a home computer helped a lot, especially because she was like a high level in like a startup. They were like a credit card processing company, but and it's just one of those things where like I feel like I never necessarily like my biggest like technological leaps I remember as a kid, at least like in my personal life, were like consoles, which I feel like in some sense they're like huge upgrades, right? Like from PS2 to PS3. I never got a PS3 though. From PS1 to PS2 um was huge. But compare that to like having a TV for the first time. Isn't that like fucking crazy? Even if it's like not even that good of a TV? I don't know. I know like I guess the comparing like high end like 4K TVs nowadays to like the CRT that I still remember from when I was young. Okay. I can marvel at modern technology a bit. My bad.
It wasn't relatable at all. People back then must have been so different, not real in the same way I was. But I remember a time before the internet, before mobile phones, and it wasn't that weird. The internet and cell phones are still, in my mind, an additional thing we now have.
So like okay, sorry, this is I love this because like for me, I remember I want to say I had like an iPod Touch by the time I was in 6th grade. And before that, I would use like those old like games that were on my parents like when it had like the physical keyboard Nokia. And I remember like Snake and stuff and playing stuff on my sister's phone. And like one of the things I recently was thinking about was like the Aragon game that I played on the phone, which I kind of liked a lot. I feel like it was really bad, but like I didn't realize at the time I actually would like that genre of like beat 'em up side scrolling. I also played like that Dragon Ball GT GBA game all the way through for some godforsaken reason. On and yeah, I don't know. I feel like I remember playing Doodle Jump in middle school. I feel like maybe it's also like the to be fair, the mobile like mobile gaming space. The thing that I don't really have much like interaction with is gotcha games, and I guess that's like the biggest. And also even like Clash Royale type games or yeah, honestly, I just really haven't kept up with mobile games. I feel like I'm just more like hardcore. But I remember like back in the day I would play like all those like little puzzle games, or like there was that one game where you had like the rocket ships, and it was like other games where like you conquer like you have a level, and like you have planets or whatever that auto gen resources like Euphoria, which is like flowers, and like you send them to attack other stuff. I love those kinds of games. But they were like ported over from like the Flash games. They worked really well on mobile. Anyways, sorry, this is I I talk about video games too much. I'm ostensibly a gaming channel.
But for my daughter, they will be what we've always had. And when I tell her about a time when no one had the internet and didn't even know they needed it, it will likely sound to her just like the old stories I heard about growing up with no TV.
AOL when I was 5.
And that's bizarre. My grandparents' childhood was weird. It was the olden days. Mine was totally normal. Protagonist syndrome is the belief that you are the main character of the universe. Recognizing that you aren't is what John Koenig famously called Sonder. The realization that
Sorry, I think I had a home computer before I was 5. It may have just been more like we upgraded to like a Dell at that point, I believe. And that Dell could do a lot of things. And then a few years later, when I was like when I was like 9, like I spent so much time on the computer. Like I played RuneScape, I played MapleStory, I played Toontown, I was getting into World of Warcraft. Like at 9, yeah. I had a childhood, but I had my own home computer at that point, and I was obviously a little fortunate with my family's financial situation. But it was such like okay, I guess like looking at that like transition, I definitely see like the marvel of technology when I was growing up. I remember like I had one of those like wooden chairs in my room, and my bed frame would be right behind me, so I would always like bend back and like have the worst posture ever. I would read Naruto fan fiction. Oh my god, it was so fun.
other people, like that stranger over there you will never see again, have full lives, just as important and consuming to them as yours is to you. I'd like to add to protagonist syndrome the concept of ab ovo syndrome. Ab ovo means from the egg, from the very beginning. In literature, it describes a story that begins at the start, ab ovo, as opposed to in the middle, in medias res. Ab ovo syndrome is the belief that the movie of the universe began when you began, that the times of your life are the plot and contain the climax, and that everything before you was just backstory.
I'm so sorry. I used to have this so badly where I felt like my like my school year was really interesting to me, and I felt like the school year above or below maybe wasn't necessarily as interesting, but I didn't have anything to base that off of. I barely even knew the folks at that time. Um and I just realized eventually like I just had a broader understanding of my year. I do think part of it was like it was just conceptually interesting. Like it was like a way of me noticing the generational divide even between like the individual years, because it really felt like the folks who were 2 years before us or 3 years were so different. Especially once we were seniors and stuff in high school compared to the seniors a few years back, or the seniors like 2 years later. I didn't really have like too good of a grasp with the folks younger than that. But like I don't know, it's always neat. I feel like thinking about like in high school specifically, like especially nowadays, like culture changes a lot. Like there's huge differences between like a year or 2 years or three. I don't know. Neat.
Everything after, merely sequels. When you realize that that's not true, that you were not born ab ovo, but in medias res, that you'll die before the credits, and that everyone who has ever lived was a fully fleshed out protagonist in their own minds, that feeling is what I call chronosonder. Sonder not just for people over there, but for people over then. Overcoming the chronocentric illusion isn't always easy. It doesn't help that people from the past are finished. Unlike us who still have choices to make, they tell the same story over and over again. They're also separated by barriers made of their own evidence. The world wasn't actually black and white in the past, and it didn't suddenly become vertical in the present. Obviously, we all know that. But the arbitrary technical properties of a time's recording media can influence our perception of the past nonetheless. If silent films didn't
I haven't
look
even
so
thought
much
about
different
that.
from what could be done just a few decades later, would it be nearly as surprising to learn that Charlie Chaplin lived long enough to watch Star Wars? When I was in high school, I saw 2001's Pipe Dream for the first time, and it blew my mind. My friends and I honestly believed that it was a real thing.
What even
someone
is
had
that?
built. But recently, I looked it up on YouTube, and I was like, this is clearly a computer animation. What the heck was wrong with us? And what do you know? The top comment was exactly that sentiment.
Yep.
Our perception of the past is constantly evolving as technology does.
I remember.
And that's significant.
Yeah,
We don't
games,
just
TV
think about
shows.
the past. We also think about the past. The material properties of an artifact can influence our relationship with what came before and push it further away. Faded yellowy color, sepia, SD pixelated video. Technological features can make the past seem like it was never as real as the present. But some kinds of evidence collapse that chronocentric divide. One way they can do it right now is by being demotic, ordinary, personal, candid. Such recordings are much more similar to the media we exchange with each other right now in the present. This footage of people goofing around in a 7-Eleven in 1987 has more than 6 million views, not just because of nostalgia, but because it's like visiting past people in their natural habitat at a time zoo.
I want to watch
This isn't some pageant with timeless ambitions. It's a view out the window of a time machine they don't know is there. Another way evidence can corrode chronocentric illusions is by containing a convention more normal than we expect. People in old photos look like serious robots because back then you had to stay in the same pose for a long time to get a picture taken. But also, a long-standing trope in the world of images up to that point was that smiling or looking goofy wasn't a sign of happiness, but of drunkenness or stupidity. But every so often, this image pops up online and people vehemently debate whether it's actually old or not. Sure, it's black and white.
That guy looks cool as fuck, dude. What? I want to have a drink with him. Oh my god.
But the expression seems too normal to really be on a person from the past. It is, however, actually an honest-to-gosh picture taken in the early 1900s, one of the earliest known photographs of a human smiling, in fact. The juxtaposition of an expression someone today might make with a medium that suggests a technology of the past creates an opportunity for chronosonder. The subject is both dead and undead, gone, but not as unrelatably far as we may have thought the past was. Finally, the chronocentric divide can fade when we find the past captured in a medium that was rare at the time but more common now. This is footage taken by an early HD camera of New York City in 1993. It's pretty cool, but there's something almost uncanny about it. Watching it isn't exactly like time traveling back to 1993, but it looks more like video taken today than many of us expect. It's like peering through a telescope.
I don't get
this. We
this.
can see them, but they can't see us.
My brain
They
doesn't
appear
like
closer,
parse this as
more
weird.
actual than usual. We lean in to get grasps of what it was like. That's part of the allure of time travel. As L.P. Hartley said, the past is a foreign country.
How it would
They do things differently there. But it hasn't always been that way. Time travel wasn't a common feature of fiction until the 19th century. Not because people hadn't thought of it before, they had, but the past and future weren't rich with interesting destinations in the same way they are to us now. In the year 1008, it wasn't an insult to call someone 1000 and late. 1,000 years ago, the culture and technology around you was unlikely to be foreign to your parents, or grandparents, or great-grandparents, and outside of an act of God or gods, you didn't expect them to be foreign to your children or their children either. 1,000 years ago, there were no 80s parties because the 980s weren't interestingly different. Pre-modern societies viewed the present as a continuation of the past. Changes were interpreted as temporary disturbances of the natural state. But today, we see the present as something special. Change is significant enough and rapid enough now that we would imagine ourselves quite differently had we been born 10 years earlier or later. Zachary Sayre Schiffman points out,
This is a good
we fail
point.
to realize that people before the 18th century did not see themselves this way. Instead of having a history, they regarded themselves as having an unchanging nature or essence, whose full realization might be impeded or impelled, but not otherwise shaped by events.
I love thinking about this
Nostalgia
as a
existed,
kid.
but for moments and
Don't know
places
why.
gone simply because they were prior to or away from here and now, not because they were fundamentally different and categorically irretrievable. As the discovery of antiquities,
Let me be clear. I don't think I was, for a large portion of my life, I was never a lay wrong generation kid. I definitely had some inklings towards that when I was like 10, but I feel like a sheltered, like, white kid like me who was raised on the internet, probably, you can see why. I listened to a lot of classic rock and stuff, but I know nowadays, like, especially like even a few years later, I always felt like because I spent so much time on the internet, like if I was born like 2 or 3 years later, it would have worked better for me. Um, but yeah, I don't know.
and new worlds and new species accelerated. As the invention of new technologies and new ways of recording accelerated, the present became less and less like the past. Reinhard Casella
Although, of course, part of this is a related effect of aging. Like in the last Vsauce video, the newer one that I watched or we watched. So yeah.
has argued that between 1750 and 1850, the acceleration of history reached a speed at which static or cyclical views of time had to be replaced with our modern view, which understands the past to be essentially different from the present. It used to be that things passed. Now, there is a past. As technological and social change accelerate, the window of time within which things can be trusted to remain stable shrinks. In such a world, to stand still is scary. Hartmut Rosa observed, the pre-modern experience of being excluded is replaced in modernity by the constantly present, fear-inducing possibility of becoming excluded, in the sense of getting left behind. Things change faster, and we keep keeping up because we are afraid to die. Whoever lives twice as fast can realize twice as many worldly possibilities, and thus, as it were, live two lives in the span of one. Whoever becomes infinitely fast no longer needs to fear death, the annihilator of options.
This sorry, this is like another thing I relate to. It's just like one of those things where when I was a kid, I remember always having this distinct desire to like be more than just like a gamer. Like I wanted to be different stereotypes, I guess. And I feel like at least when I was in high school, it felt like there weren't like cliques per se. Like cliques blended together a lot more than like it seemed to based on the stories I had from my parents or like movies, TV shows, and other older people. But it was always interesting to me. Like I had this very like, and I still do. I have this. I want to like try out a bunch of different fits and stuff. I'm sure eventually on this stream you'll see me wear a bunch of different stuff. I also want to try makeup more, well, at all, and like have fun with it. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like this what they're saying in this book is so true about like at least for me, like I want to experience different lives.
Acceleration becomes a secular substitute for eternity. To achieve this salvation, we try to make things faster and easier to save time. But one of the greatest hoodwinks we ever pulled on ourselves was not noticing that the things we do to save time leave us with less of it and more alone in it. No technological change is only technological. The car allowed people to travel more quickly and whenever they wanted, but once available, it meant people could live further from where they worked. So cities and towns changed, personal associations changed, roads divided neighborhoods, created new opportunities, while ending others. Jobs and industries and cultural forms of expression and a whole different society sprang into existence simply because we found a way to move faster. Likewise, smartphones and the internet made information access and communication easier and faster, but that's not all they did. Along with them came new social conventions, new communities, new levels of exposure to ideas and conflict, a new understanding of what it meant to be available. That's a lot to have to adapt to. They even redefined what
Email was like, I know you're on
is made of.
vacation with your
Digital
family, but
spaces are
respond.
filled with not just what's being said, but also what has been said. And it's all right there, not tucked into a library across town or on a tiny plaque on a statue covered in bird poop. It's in our
It should go
hands
like this.
and outside of time. Things used to acquire signs of age, veneers that tucked them appropriately into their place in time. Now, they're automatically updated to always look like now. Digital spaces are now, they're automatically updated to always look like now.
I didn't even think about that. I've seen so many old tweets in my brain just automatically like, wow. And like I use Twitter, like, oh, I think it's because I use TweetDeck when I used Twitter when I was like 12 or 13. Oh, that's why it's more like modern in my head, I think. That makes sense. Also, I've used Twitter a lot more now that I'm older. I use it to mostly follow like esports stuff and also like political news because like journalists use Twitter and following their personal Twitter can result in interesting stuff.
Digital spaces are so packed with timeless messages between bygone people that we don't even ask, is anyone here? Anymore. Instead, we ask, is anyone now? In order to adapt to all of this, we have to consume information in an increasingly dehumanized, decontextualized, and decentralized way.
Yeah, like this is sorry, I was reading recently like something cool interesting about TikTok is like it's a social network aimed at discovering people you don't know on the internet versus like Facebook and stuff like that, which is more about meeting people offline and then being friends with them online too. And like as a kid, this is what I wanted. So it's neat in a way.
Each next bit is often unrelated to the last.
Like this is like Kick, but on steroids.
Our participation is not acknowledged or assumed, and it's all fed to us by machines we don't know and didn't build that only put it in our eyes and ears. The sheer weight of all of this accreting information and its growing accessibility is awe-inspiring. It may even be our purpose. I mean, what else produces such detailed records? Purposefully or not, we record, save, collect, organize, and preserve events like nothing else in the universe. I've said before that if humans were to go extinct, the sun would still shine, the universe would keep expanding, Jupiter would continue being gassy, but the universe would lose its best autobiographer. But the technologies of this project have yet to address our bodies. Enter the TV paradox. Remember the short-long and long-short patterns of time? Well, a new pattern has been emerging and growing in frequency. Short-short. It was first observed in people watching TV alone. They reported feeling like time flew by quickly. Oh, wow, have I really been watching for 4 hours? But later, they didn't remember their TV session as a major moment of significant import or duration.
I don't relate to this. I actually remember my TV watching. But like I've been watching Netflix type stuff. Sorry, I was making sure my camera wasn't delayed. Since I was like 11. is when I got Netflix at my house. I want to say maybe 12 or 13, but it was mail order partly back then. But like, because I intentionally watched a lot of shows, I feel like I never like got super like I remember watching them. I remember like watching the IT Crowd as like the first or second thing I rented from Netflix and loving it and watching it more. Of course, I also explicitly went back and like looked at my watch history and found the year and the month I watched it in and tried to like piece it together. And that strengthened it in my mind. So I don't know. Maybe I'm weird.
They didn't attend to the passing of time during it. They didn't feel bored or like time dragged, but they also didn't accumulate a lot of new, significant, memory-worthy experiences. Rapid, stimulating streams of experience provide a fullness that makes time fly by, but fractured, desensualized, one-way experiences feel unconnected to ourselves and our larger life histories.
I will say like even doom scrolling. I guess okay. I definitely when I've like been scrolling on Reddit and like browsing dozens of different subreddits, I definitely don't have like strong memories of the comments I read and stuff and all that. I more remember like the emotion I felt. Um so that's true. Yeah.
Retrospectively, they don't fill up a lot of space. They burn our time on both ends. It feels shorter during and after. Interestingly, short has not been found when people engage with content they have connections with. For example, things they own memorabilia of,
Okay.
made friendships through, attended conventions about. So the pace of life may be taking your life from you, but standing could give you your life back.
I genuinely relate to this because like I've been a lot more into media I've consumed in the past few years too, and I feel like a lot of it like stays in my mind more. Like I explicitly seek out talking about it with friends and like I explicitly try and seek out cool stuff. Um like I'm never going to forget playing through Kingdom Hearts. I don't think I'll ever forget what I was doing in my life during that period. Uh, like both when I was older and now when I was younger too. And like knowing that, like it feels really cool to me.
In the future, we will surely find other ways to overcome the negative side effects of the faster experiences we crave. The development of digital media that engage the other senses, more linked as they are with long-term memory, or that build contexts for us could help. So could surgical solutions, like removing the parts of the brain that make us not like doom scrolling. Probably first, any anxieties will be recognized as a condition treatable with medication. Now, this is all to say that we live in a transitional period. The conquest of space made the world smaller, and now the conquest of time has made our lives smaller. We live after the conquering of time, but before its resurrection. In the meantime, make some time for time to control you. Be bored, miss out, fall behind, feel time passing. Lose track of time while experiencing only what your body can alone. You might not have the time of your life, but you'll have more time of your life. I'll see you next time. And as always, thanks for watching.
Oh, it was like a minute outro. I wonder what's in it.
A great way to engage all of your senses is a
Oh.
subscription to our Curiosity Box.
Wow.
A seasonal delivery of viral physics toys, puzzles, books, games, all curated and cooked up by us. Our
For
winter box
real?
comes with a kinetic torus knot, a device for creating electricity out of produce, try bananas, and lots more. Our mission at the Curiosity Box is to be good for all brains. So we donate a portion of all proceeds to Alzheimer's research and our Inquisitive Fellowship, which just gives money and resources to educational creators so they can make the kinds of videos they want to make. Do your brain a favor and sign up today. I'm really proud of it and I appreciate all of your support. And as always, thanks for watching.
I really love this video. I'm not 100% sure if I liked it more than the other Vsauce I watched, because I really like playing along with that one, but this one was so cool. Obviously, like, I've already made this react, I think, like 40 something minutes. Um, yeah, that was just so neat. I'm really happy I watched this. Thank you to the person who recommended it this. Um, I'm so bad at I should like try and like give a shout out specifically. I feel like if I do a viewer request, that's probably a smart idea. I'll try and do that in the future. But all right, let's read some comments. Baby Michael. He Aw. Sorry, parents. Aw, he's about to say his first word. Baby Michael. Hey, Vsauce. Michael here. He may not accept this title because he's such a humble guy, but I think Michael is one of our generation's most exquisite thinkers. Even if a lot of what he's presenting are ideas that may have been said before, his way of extrapolating that info, recontextualizing it, and presenting it for the audience of the world is truly special. I think he has a good way of presenting his videos and doing the video essay format. I can't say like enough if like this is really high praise, but yeah, I can see why they're saying it. You do understand that he is literally creating completely new science concepts of science and philosophy in this video, and not just reciting a book. He is literally becoming the new age philosopher. Michael will be put in history books. Wait, really? Wait, I guess I'm crazy. I didn't notice that. Like, he definitely explained a lot of stuff. Michael, I don't know if you realize this, but you're literally a modern philosopher. You're literally stating new concepts in philosophy. This is a lot of dick riding. Um, I'm sure it's justified to a degree. I'm uncomfortable. The stream is not rated M. I'm not even streaming right now, but I swear one day every react on this video will be done on this channel will be done on stream. Um, as someone in their 60s, it's weird how younger people tend to lump all old people together as an amorphous mass, when in fact it's possible for 3 generations of very different people to exist in that category. This is true. Also, having retired, I think you're right that time appears to fly by, because every day is more or less the same. Also, though I'm slowing down, it takes much longer to get. Wait. Also, though, physically I'm slowing down. It takes much longer to get mundane tasks done than it did a few years ago, and if my body is slowing down, my mental functions probably are too. This would also give the illusion of time speeding up. To counter this, I consciously try to rush through, though that leads to tiredness and the need for extra sleep. Time, I have to say, has grown to be my greatest enemy. There's still so much I want to do. Another thing I've noticed is that all of us, to a certain extent, is stuck in their own little time bubble, the decade of their formative years. For me, that's the 70s. My attitude, politics, sense of humor, spiritual views, reading themes, preferred style of clothing all stem from that era. We're all prisoners of time. I think, like, for me, I relate to this in a sense, but I also don't. Because I feel like for me, the 00s, which is where I predominantly spent like the younger area of my life in before like my teenage years and stuff, um, I didn't do too much except for play video games. And then my teenage years, until I got into high school, I don't think I really did too much either. Except for like play video games and like try in school a bit. But and then I feel like in high school, like I really like those are like in a lot of ways my formative years. And then also like I've had major life changes since then too. And I feel like even now like I'm still like in my formative years in a way. Um I don't know. It's I feel like the vast majority of people this applies to. and maybe I have like, oh, like protagonist special syndrome or something. But I do think there's a chance for like your life too, because of the specific actions that embark in it, for you to go through like major things on a different time frame than the typical, especially in like a world where experiences can be very individualized and so like unique because of all the things that you interact with. A few things: when Jane Austen wrote her characters were riding a horse, she wasn't making that up. A horse was the only mode of transportation. To me, that is fascinating. Also, things written in the Bible from thousands of years ago that talked about the sun. That is the same sun. Also, since the year 2000, time has flown by very fast. My mind is actually blown. I don't know how you keep making better videos year after year. And yeah, the first time I saw videos of my parents while being older than them was weird. Yeah, that's true. I saw pictures of my parents' wedding, which was younger than what I am now, and they still look a little older to me, but that's because of the style, like talked about in the newer video. Um, right, this is the last comment I'm gonna read because this video is really long and I would like to get it out before 2 o'clock, hopefully. My mom once showed me a video of one of her birthdays in the 80s. She just sat the camera on a table and filmed the entire dinner with her friends. It's so uncanny and mind blowing because it's my mom, but it's also people my age hanging out like I do with my friends. Five in the Avenue New project has the same vibes. It's basically modern vlogging, but set in New York in the late 80s. He filmed his friends in clubs, parties at different houses, or just walking down the street, and it's so current. But suddenly, a young RuPaul appears, and you realize how long ago this actually was. I wanna, maybe I'll do reacts to like stuff like that. I feel like that could be really cool. I'd have to make sure it's not like copyrighted content. But thank you for watching, folks. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye. I'll do more Vsauce for sure. Hey folks, thank you so much for watching. Remember to like the video, subscribe on YouTube, follow on Twitch, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.